Alright, you lot. So I did a video last week about Steam, about how maybe, just maybe, we should stop treating Valve like they're our best mate and start treating them like multi-billion-pound corporation they actually are. I talked about lawsuits, abandoned games, digital ownership issues, and alleged anti-competitive practices currently being argued in federal court. As expected, comment section had opinions. Some disagreed but kept it civil. Then there were Twonk. Now this wasn't your standard YouTube rage comment, unlike this absolute melt. No, Twonk wrote an entire dissertation. He opens with, "This is such an ill-researched and actively biased video, it ain't even funny. You constantly present everything in worst possible light, looking for worst faith possible tech you can twist things into. This video is absolutely disgusting." Now, no, he said disgusting. Not wrong, not inaccurate, disgusting. Like I'd filmed myself kicking puppies while reading out Valve's quarterly earnings. Now, yeah, Twonk actually made some valid points buried in there. He clearly knows his stuff about Steam's back-end tools, Proton development, and technical details at Wolfire lawsuit. But knowing your stuff and being right, two very different things. And this Twonk has made classic mistake of confusing Steam provides value with therefore Steam can do no wrong. So let's go through this bollocks, point by point, see where Twonk's defence of Valve's honour holds up, and where it falls apart like a cheap IKEA bookshelf. It starts with Team Fortress 2, and is full on taking piss. It says, "Valve provided active dev support for a decade before saying, alright, we're done. You're being quite unreasonable here, trying to go, well, it's still unpopular, therefore Valve should have to keep putting dev time into it. That's an entirely unreasonable position to take. I'd argue Valve are actively not being greedy by not trying to further milk TF2. Right. So according to Twonk, we should be grateful that Valve ain't being more greedy. That's Barna. Not they should maintain the game. Not they should address bot crisis. Just, well, at least they're not actively trying to squeeze more money out of it. Except they are, aren't they? Manco stores still open. Loot boxes are still for sale. Games still making money. Even if you can earn them for free by playing game, it's still in top region of Steam's most played games. Tens of thousands of concurrent players every single day, still supporting a live service game that's allegedly done. But Twonk's argument is that Valve done talk community out after a decade of support. And you know what? In a vacuum, that's not entirely unreasonable. Companies aren't legally obliged to support games forever. But here's the problem. Valve is still profiting from it. They're still selling items. They're still taking marketplace cuts. They're still collecting revenue from a game they've allegedly moved on from. You can't have it both ways. You can't say we're done with this game while simultaneously keeping cash register open. That's not noble restraint. That's having your cake, eating it, and charging community £2.49 for a virtual act to go eat it. And then there's bot crisis. Twonk says, botting only exploded into a problem alongside pandemic, when you had a lot more malicious children and people who never grew up locked at home with no better to do. Oh, so it's pandemic's fault. Not Valve's years of neglect or skeleton crew of 4 developers allegedly left maintaining one of the flagship titles. Ah, it's those pesky children with no better to do. Fun fact about bot problem, it existed before pandemic. Sure, it got worse during lockdown, but it didn't start there, and Valve didn't do anything meaningful about it until Save TF2 campaign went viral in 2022. That's years worth of community begging for help before Valve finally threw them a freaking bone. Twonk also mentions community servers that didn't have bot problems. Yeah, cause community server admins actually gave a shit. They moderated, they banned, they maintained the servers. You know, all things Valve should have been doing for their official matchmaking. But according to Twonk, players are simply too lazy to do all other than click matchmake button, meaning it's players' fault for expecting official matchmaking to work. And apparently this applies to Counter-Strike as well. It says CS2's hardware requirements literally call for hardware that were over a decade old when it was launched, and that I'm being ridiculous for criticising Valve for deleting CSGO. But I wasn't criticising hardware requirements. I was criticising the fact that they replaced one game with another and left players who couldn't upgrade with no. Years of progress. skins, ranks, all gone, because Valve decided old version didn't need to exist anymore. But hey, the saints for not milking TF2 harder, right? I'd say get fuck out of here, but you had more to say. So Twonk goes full-blown conspiracy theorist about customer service. He says, a lot of issues with Valve's support team boils down to Valve explicitly not wanting to hire a bunch of outsiders or outsource to handle support tickets. They don't want to do that, because hiring on a bunch of people to do that also leaves an opening for ideologues and other bad actors to try to infiltrate. I'm sorry, what? Valve's customer service is shit because they're worried about ideological infiltration. Are you having a fucking laugh? So I guess Twonk here thinks person resetting your password needs a background check by MI5 to make sure they aren't woke. Mate, it's a support ticket, not a fucking cabinet meeting. He's so worried about bad actors infiltrating refund department that he's happy to let a multi-billion-dollar company treat its customers like unwanted chore. It's a level of corporate sycophancy that'd make a Victorian chimney sweep blush. EA, Sony, Microsoft, Nintendo, hell, even fucking Ubisoft has more decent customer support. They've managed to hire people to answer tickets without the companies turning into woke sleeper cells. This is peak conspiracy brain. Valve hiring support staff because they're protecting us from woke mob. What's next? Aliens infiltrating government? Is Earth fucking flat? No, mate. They're not hiring support staff because they don't want to spend money. That's it. Valve's a private company worth billions. They could afford to hire a proper support team tomorrow if they wanted to. They just choose not to. Now, get Twonk this. He admits this is most valid my complaints, which is bigger him. But then he says, you're only citing sources from a decade ago and attacking entirely wrong part of it. Oh, right. So, Better Business Bureau gave Valve an F rating in 2015, and Valve failing to respond to over 500 complaints. That's ancient history, is it? Completely irrelevant. Water under bridge. Get stuffed. Problem still exists a decade later. Look at Steam support reviews on Trustpilot right now. You'll still find complaints about slow response times, template answers, and genuine issues getting buried in automated help. The fact that BBB documented it a decade ago don't mean it's been fixed. Then Twonk also says, I went and checked BBB reviews for him. It's literally all Valve stuck to terms and agreement, but I don't like that so 1 star with regards to refund windows. Right. So every single complaint is just entitled customers who didn't read terms. None of them are legitimate. None of them represent genuine failures of service. They're all just whinging. But that's not what BBB report said. It said Valve failed to respond to over 500 complaints. Not responded with an answer customer didn't like. Failed, as in ignored them entirely. That's not sticking to terms of agreement. That's not even engaging with customer in first place. But you keep defending Valve's honour, Twonk. I'm sure Gabe Newell will send you a medal any day now. Then Twonk moves on to Epic Games. He says, Epic is in fact not an example that it's possible to run a digital storefront unless EGS is still losing money to be in operation, according to latest available data, which it's telling Epic hasn't released any data since 2023 in this regard, and still provides far less services, both consumer side and provider side, to justify cut their tech. Right, so first problem with that, Twonk, it's absolute bollocks. See, Epic released their 2024 year in review at start of 2025. It's publicly available. You can read it right now. And I'm sure their 2025 review will drop in the next few weeks. So, you might want to check that one. But let's address actual argument. Because Epic is losing money, that proves 12% is unsustainable. Case closed. Right? Wrong. That's not how market disruption works. Epic is losing money because they're buying exclusives, giving away free games, and offering developers better deals to build market share. That's cost of breaking into a market dominated by a near monopoly. It's an investment strategy, not proof that your business model is fundamentally broken. Netflix and Amazon both lost money for years while they were scaling. That's how you compete with an established giant. You take it up front, build audience, recoup later. So, using their current losses as proof that Steam's 30% is justified is intellectually dishonest. It ignores entire context of why Epic is spending that money in the first place. You're basically confusing two completely separate arguments. One argument is, does Steam provide value for that 30%? And answers, yeah, in many ways they do. Proton, workshop, community features, back-end tools for developers, all legitimate. Other arguments, does that value justify potentially anti-competitive behaviour? Answer is absolutely fucking not. You can acknowledge that Steam provides good service while still saying if they're using the market dominance to suppress price competition, that's illegal. These are not mutually exclusive positions. It's called critical thinking. Then Twonk gets completely ridiculous. In the original video, I mentioned the GDC survey where only 6% of developers said Steam's 30% cut is justified, and vast majority wanted something close to 10 to 15%. Twonk's response? You mean same GDC where they have group screaming sessions these days? Same GDC holding panels on microaggression in gaming and other nonsense that give time of day to malicious actors like Sarkeesian and SBI? Are you kidding me? So, cause 10% of GDC of panels Twonk don't like, entire survey is invalid. That's not a rebuttal. That's dirty politics dressed up as analysis. You don't get to dismiss industry data cause conference also hosts a few minor panels you disagree with. That's not how research works. That's just you plugging your ears and shouting, I don't like these people, so they're wrong. You can't dismiss 94% of developers who want a better revenue split for that. That's ultimate Twonk logic. I saw a panel about microaggression I didn't like, therefore economic reality at 30% price floor is fake. It's like saying you won't believe weather report just cause meteorologist wears a tie you don't like. One has no to do with other. But when you're desperate to defend Lord Gaben, any distraction will do, won't it? Twonk continues with, same devs who have a bias towards saying no that don't result in more money in the pockets is bad. I openly bias source. Oh, here we go. So developers wanting better margins are biased, are they? They're not allowed to have an opinion on what's fair because obviously they're financially motivated. But get this, Twonk. If developer opinions on revenue splits are biased, then by same standard, Valve's opinions on their own 30% cut is also biased. They're financially motivated to defend it, so why are we taking their word as gospel? You can't have that both ways. Either we listen to what industry professionals say about their own work conditions, or we dismiss everyone as biased and make decisions in a vacuum. Pick one. Twonk continues with, oh, good heavens. People taking any excuse they can to try and argue for cheaper services. What a scandalous shock. What kind of nonsense is this? Yeah, what kind of nonsense is this, Twonk? People wanting fair compensation for their labour? Workers wanting better deals from platforms that take a third of their revenue? How dare they? And Twonk goes on. Steam provides a ton of very useful and cost-saving tools to developers behind the scenes. I know this because I've seen and interacted with them. Great, I don't doubt that. I never said Steam don't provide developer tools. I said 30% cut has become price floor for entire PC gaming market. And if Valve is preventing developers from selling cheaper elsewhere, that's a problem. Twonk also mentions Steam's investment in hardware, VR, Linux gaming through Proton. All fantastic. All irrelevant to the legal question of whether they're engaging in anti-competitive practices. It's like saying, yeah, my landlord charges extortionate rent, but he did fix boiler that one time, so it's fine. No, mate, those are separate issues. This is peak bootlicking. Corporation said 30% is fair, so it must be. Anyone who disagrees is just being greedy. For fuck's sake, Twonk, have some fucking dignity. Now we get to the part where Twonk really shows his ass. Twonk says, Steam Deck launched in February 2022, less than a year after Wolfire's initial lawsuit filing, which were dismissed due to lack of merit, mind you, before they changed their claims and refiled. Steam Deck were not designed, tested and put into manufacturing in less than a year. Right. So, cause Steam Deck were in development to Favoured lawsuit, that proves Valve competes in console market, which means they don't have a monopoly in PC gaming. Case closed. Yeah, that's not how market definition works, Twonk. Yeah, Steam Deck is a handheld gaming device, and yeah, it competes with the same handheld audience at Switch or PlayStation Portal. However, legally and functionally, Steam Deck is not a console. Consoles are a closed system where digital locks and terms of service prevent you from modifying software. You risk legal action or bricking device for jailbreaking it. You also can't natively install competing storefronts like GOG or Epic Games on a console. Steam Deck is a portable PC, a niche product that extends Steam's reach into a mobile form factor, rather than a redefinition of what Steam platform actually is. Valve's argument in court is that if you define market broadly enough to include consoles, their market share drops from 75% to under 30%, and suddenly monopoly claims fall apart. It's a clever legal strategy, but it's also bollocks. And Twonk conveniently ignores important factor. Lawsuit was initially dismissed, yeah, and then it was refiled with better evidence. And then it was granted class action status. A judge does not grant that status unless evidence or a common harm is significant. And now it represents 32,000 game developers and potentially billions in damages. You don't get class certification on flimsy claims. Court looked at evidence and said, yeah, there's enough here to proceed. That's not ideological bias. That's due process. Twonk says they also wouldn't even need to try to redefine market, because at the time the lawsuit was filed, EGS were literally on the platform not asking a 30% cut. Cute. But that's literally definition of a cartel, Twonk. When everyone in an industry charges at the same rate and nobody can compete on price, that's evidence of price fixing. And then Twonk drops this absolute gem. Valve having monopoly is not a problem. What is a problem is what they do here to now they maintain it. Oh, monopolies are fine, are they? So long as they're nice about it. No, Twonk, that's not how antitrust law works. Monopolies are inherently problematic because they suppress competition, reduce innovation, and allow dominant player to set terms that benefit them at expense of everyone else, including you. You can argue Valve got the dominance through legitimate means. You can argue they provide good services. But you can't argue that having a monopoly is fine as long as they're not too mean about it. That's not a legal defence. That's a corporate boot pressed gently but firmly on your face. And then he's saying there's extant counter-evidence to the lawsuit. And this is where he reveals he fundamentally don't understand accusation. Twonk says there is in fact extant counter-evidence to class action just by the fact that a number of games that were exclusive to EGS or other platforms maintained same prices as what standard supposedly forced by Steam's supposedly abusive 30% cut setup. Right, so costs Epic exclusives cost same as Steam games. That proves there's no price fixing. But that's literally the entire point of the lawsuit. Allegation is that Valve has an unwritten most favoured nation clause that prevents developers from selling cheaper elsewhere. Even if Epic takes 12%, you can't pass those savings on to consumers. You have to match Steam's price. So when you say a game states same price on Epic, you're not providing counter-evidence. You're describing exactly what lawsuit alleges is happening. If a developer wanted to sell their game for 15 quid on Epic, where they keep 88%, and later for 20 quid on Steam, where they keep 70%, Valve had allegedly threatened to delist them. So a developer makes it 20 quid everywhere, meaning Steam's 30% cut effectively becomes price floor for entire market. That's anti-competitive behaviour, Twonk, and you've just described it while thinking you were disproving it. Then Twonk also brings up GOG. Even GOG is just providing a license. GOG sharply limits its selection with its refusal to work with publishers who want DRM. Right, so GOG refuses to work with publishers who want DRM. That's claim. Except they partner with Activision, EA, 2K, Capcom, Devolver, Bethesda, Epic Games, Square Enix, Bandai Namco, Paradox, THQ Nordic, Double Fine, Larian, Daedalic, most DRM-loving company in entire fucking planet, Ubisoft. You know, Ubisoft. Company that made Ubisoft Connect mandatory. Company that says you don't own your games. Company that deletes games from your library. That Ubisoft. They're on GOG, selling DRM-free versions of their games. So tell me again how GOG refuses to work with publishers who want DRM. Go on, I'm listening. What GOG actually does is require that games sold on the platform are DRM-free. That's not refusing to work with publishers, that's setting terms. Publishers can choose to accept those terms or not, and clearly, a lot of them do. including some of the biggest names in industry. Yes, Twonk, GOG provides a license to access intellectual property. Nobody's arguing otherwise. Difference is GOG also provides DRM-free offline installers that can't be remotely revoked. If GOG shuts down tomorrow, I still have my installers. If Steam shuts down tomorrow, I have none unless Valve graciously decides to unlock DRM first. That's difference between owning a copy and renting access. And yeah, GOG's catalogue is smaller than Steam's because not every publisher is willing to go DRM free. That's trade-off. Some people value selection. Some people value ownership. Neither position's wrong, but pretending they're the same thing is intellectually dishonest. And claiming GOG refuses to work with publishers who want DRM when they literally partner with likes of Ubisoft is just, come on, Twonk. At least get your basic facts straight. Twonk finishes with, Steam does not prevent transfer accounts. They just aren't going to officially put in methods, as that would be a mess of legal issues and open incentives to scam. If you don't self-report, they won't do a thing. So Valve's terms of service say you can't transfer accounts, but Twonk reckons they'll turn a blind eye unless you make it a problem. That's not a defence, Twonk. Saying rules exist, but they might not enforce it is arguably worse than just having a clear policy. It means you're relying on corporate goodwill and hoping they don't decide to crack down later. And look, even if that's true, it still doesn't address core issue. When you die, your Steam library dies with you. You can't legally pass it on. You can't put it in a will. That collection you've been building for years is gone. But sure, Twonk, you keep defending that. And after all of that, it's this accusation that really tickles me. Twonk says, this entire video comes across as a personal vendetta you hold. We are absolutely one-sided. Your attempts at reporting or educating are. Right, so video that opened with me saying, so as we know, Steam is genuinely good at what it does. Client works, sales are legendary, library management is solid, community features are extensive, workshop support for mods is brilliant, remote play, family sharing, Steam Deck. Valve's earned a lot of goodwill over 20-odd years. That were one-sided. Video that explicitly said, I'm not telling you to delete Steam. I'm not even telling you to stop using it. I've got thousands of games on there myself. What I am telling you is to stop treating Valve like they're your mate. They're not. That were a personal vendetta. Listen up, Twonk. Criticism ain't same as bias. Holding a company accountable for documented issues into vendetta. It's consumer advocacy. It's what's supposed to happen when a corporation gets big enough that nobody questions them anymore. I fully acknowledge good things Steam does. I just refuse to let those good things excuse bad things without need for bias. That's balance. Meanwhile, you've written an entire essay defending Valve without acknowledging a single legitimate criticism. You've dismissed BBB complaints, GDC survey, antitrust lawsuit, digital ownership concerns. All of it. You've found an excuse or a conspiracy theory for everything. And you're calling me one-sided? Twonk, you're so deep in Steam bubble you think balanced reporting is an attack. You've spent thousands of words arguing that Valve's monopoly is fine. The customer service is justified. The 30% cut is fair. And anyone who disagrees is either biased, lazy, or ideologically compromised. That's full-on simping with extra steps. Twonk also says, you even preemptively label people who disagree with you as simps in your pinned comment, showing you don't actually want to talk. You just want people to agree with your tech. You mean comment that says, I love my Steam Deck as much as anyone, but being a fan shouldn't mean being a simp? I called out people who defend corporations like they're defending the mates. People who treat Gabe Newell like gaming Santa Claus and refuse to acknowledge any legitimate criticism of Valve's practices, much like you did in your comment. But here's the thing. If you'd written a comment saying, hey, I disagree with your take on this part, here's why, we'd have a conversation. Instead, you wrote a dissertation calling my video disgusting and ill-researched while defending every single thing Valve's ever done. And finally, Twonk says, all that really needs to be pointed out is that you don't link your sources, just showing sensationalist headlines and flying off head with very biased text. Right, so court documents, BBB report, GDC survey, news articles about lawsuits, California licensing law, GOG statements, all of that were sensationalist headlines. Look, I talked about specific cases, dates, dollar amounts, and legal proceedings. You didn't cite a single source in your entire essay. Not one. You make claims about Epic losing money, about Steam Deck's development timeline, about BBB complaints. All we add to single link or reference. And you're accusing me of not linking sources? Fucking audacity on this kid. Seems for this twonk, every single criticism had to be dismissed, explained away, or blamed on someone else entirely. That's some serious apologism. And it's exactly the kind of thinking that lets corporations get away with murder because the customers are too busy defending them to hold them accountable. So Twonk, for your valiant defence of Valve's honour in face of documented legal proceedings, industry surveys, and basic consumer criticism, I hereby award you Steam Defence Force Medal of Honour, complete with a lifetime supply of copium. Wear it with pride. And to everyone else, you can use Steam. You can enjoy Steam. You can appreciate what Valve does well. But for fuck's sake, stop treating them like they're your mate. They're a corporation. They'll screw you over the moment it's profitable to do so. That's not a biased take. That's reality. So don't be a twonk. Like, subscribe and all that bollocks. Drop your comments below. Especially if you're another Steam Defence Force conscript ready to write me a novel. And I'll see you next time, you magnificent.